You're known for being such a connector. I know when we talk about connecting at the Jackson Center, it was a brand new project. We just bought the building. You are a Mason, right? And when you first heard that there was going to be a group that might be interested in the Scottish Rite Consistory, what did you think?
Well, being the 32nd degree,
Yep.
I knew what was on the table. And I'll say this to you candidly. You'll have to cut this out of your tape.
Yep.
That old regime, not that there's anything wrong with them, because some of the nicest men you ever met in your life were there. But they missed when they bought that church from that group where they put the thing. That church was not constructed at all good, because I went down and rebuilt it. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, I could see the handwriting on the wall. And to make matters a whole bunch worse, there's a couple of members of that thing are independently wealthy. You know that.
Yep.
And they were wonderful guys, but I never would go after an answer about why they wouldn't take care of that. But they didn't until, well, towards the end, because they had a Masonic guy come out there and give them an engineering thing on that building for an addition it was on. Mm-hmm. I think he charged them 15 grand for the plan, which was, they totally didn't need it. So I went out there and I said, look, I'll build a building just the way that plan says. If you don't give them the 15 grand, you can give half of that. Well, so the old people were there, and he did get the 15 grand. But I went out anyway. And then you had some of them old timers that come down there, and they'd go out there in the middle of the day and try to find something wrong with the way the guy was putting the building together. And that irritated me, and I attended a meeting one time and really shouted, And so they stayed away from there. And they put it back together. And what was it? Stanley Weeks come to me on the phone. He called me on the phone and says, I want to see you in my office, when he was in the hotel.
Right.
So I go down. His office looks more like a bank vault in an office, So, and in there I said, what do you want to see me about? He said, how much is it going to take to do that whole job? I said, it's going to take about $12,000 to put that addition on. He said, that's unheard of. He said, it'll cost twice that much. I said, you asked me what it's going to cost. If I do it, it's going to cost you $12,000. And I ain't taking a dime. And he just stepped back there and looked at me. He said, well, he said, well, as you say it and you can do it, then you go ahead and do it. And he said, whatever it costs you, I'll pick it up. It was that simple. No more money talk, no more nothing. You get about 2/3 of that addition up, and the rest of that roof up there, I got to tell you, I don't know how they nailed it together, but the shingles were really falling off, So I called him up one day and I said, Stanley, I said, it's going to cost you another $6,000. He said, that's all right. I says, because the roof is shot up there, and I'm going to put a new roof on it, and I want to use architectural shingles, which are heavy, Well, they did the same thing in the Jackson Center. And so he said, boy, that's a lot of money for shingles. I said, this ain't 1925 either. So anyway, every time I said it, write the check. Did
Stan have conversations with you about the center, the consistory itself, when we were thinking about made an offer? The background, as you just aware from my perspective, is that I had interviewed Stan about Jackson, not the center, just Jackson. And towards December of 2000, Stan called me and said, Greg, if you're ever interested in doing something with with having a Jackson Center, you should consider the consistory because there's an offer on it. He didn't tell me who or how much. And now would be a good time since Jackson was, of course, the 33rd degree Mason. And at the time, I was having some conversations with Carl Kappa, Betty Linnae, Tom Cardman, about a concept, only a concept. Then I met with Carlton Winchester and said, Stan called and wondered if you were going to, might be interested. He goes, well, there is a contract and we're going to vote on it soon. And I said, oh my gosh, what if I gave you a contract and I don't even want to know what the amount, I'll just put Greg Peterson, purchase price the same, and you can stay. Because the other offer I didn't know said they had to leave. And he said, well, present it. And then Judge Cass, through Betty Linnae, got a hold. Betty called Judge Cass, and he sort of, I use the term Masonic injunction, simply saying, stop. We're not going to vote on that offer until we see what Greg's got to offer. And that was the beginning. I just wondered during that time period, did Stan or Carlton or anybody reach out to you, Don, because you knew the building probably as well as anybody?
Somewhat.
Yeah.
But, you know, me being a kind of wise little chicken, I could read more between the lines than anything, and I knew exactly what you needed. I knew exactly. You needed time. Mm-hmm. Because you were out there hunting for money, which is the biggest chore that they can ever put you through, as you well know. And I said, well, we'll do it. And I never talked to you about this. I don't think I did anyway. About going in, and I can remember walking in the front door. That front door hadn't been open in 10 years, I swear. You know, and I go in there, and I walked in that front door, and I walked halfway down the hallway, and then I went into the boardroom. Just filthy. Everything was filthy. And then I came to you and I said, we got to clean this up. And some of the ceiling was hanging down and all that. And I had, what was his name? He's a big wheel with the Vikings. The carpenter. He came in and replaced all them things according to my specifications. And because I didn't want any joints in them ceiling blocks or anything, you know, so the piece of drywall came up and you get two ceilings out of a piece of drywall. And so he did them just the way I said, so that you look up there now, it just looked like it always had been there. Mm-hmm. And then I told him 2 coats of white paint. I don't want to see any paint on any of the wood. If you got to mask it, I don't care how you do it. And he was saying, well, it's going to cost, Ed, don't worry about what it's going to cost. We had that policy with Code Incorporated that we used to, and I don't even know if I don't think anybody ever really knew this, but I'd take these welfare workers in, and they had to work for me. That was part of their grant. And you know, that was an almost impossible group to work with, but quite frankly, you don't dare to print this either. a tough guy, you know. I'd say, you know, you're either going to come in there and you're going to do a job, and you're not going to holler at the girls, and you're not going to do this, and you're not going to do this, and I find it out, I'm going to come up here and hammer your head, you know, in plain English. So they walked the line. So I had to come home here and have my wife remember what my mother used to clean all the woodwork in our house with. And it was turpentine. Jesus, I can only know, I don't think I remember it today. Anyway, it was a real concoction. And when you, and you couldn't, you didn't put it on the wall, you dampened a rag, you know, and you had to wear rubber gloves. And where all them pictures were on the wall, there was also 25 years of cigar smoke.
Yes, I remember.
And so you get into that centerpiece and you get that clean, and then you go over the wood very carefully. And as fast as you go over the wood, you got to wipe it off, because the stuff is strong that I'm telling you about. And you got to admit, it looked like $100 when it was all over with. You know,
absolutely.
The ceiling, everything was clean. It even smelled bitter in there. You know, one of the biggest things that used to stick in my craw, and I never told you about it, but the guy that you had hired there took me a long time to even be close to friends with his, because I thought he was the biggest bullshitter that ever lived. And so he always be in there trying to give me some kind of instructions. And finally I said, you know, if you want me to have any instructions, you better go talk to Greg, because I don't particularly like your instructions. So anyway, I cleaned that room, and then you remember all the sabers and
Yeah.
those two stools out front must have had 10 each in there. So I get these guys, and now I've got the biggest thieves in the world working for me, right? So I get them down there. I said, there's 10 in this one, 9 in this one. Once you get them, put them on a cart, take them down to the bleachers, go around back, and I'll meet you there. We put them all in there so that I could tell the Masonic Lodge where all their trinkets were.
Mm-hmm.
And then for days after that, we found more and more and more and more, and this and that and the other thing, you know. And it's all under, I don't know whatever happened to it, but I told the guys what it was. I said, if you want it, you better get up there and get it, because one of the big sticklers about that is that if you were ever at a household sale or any kind of a sale and you've seen a Masonic item, it's you have to buy it. You're supposed to buy it and take it off the market. So anyway, I had all that stuff, and I said, and if I ever catch anybody back here that ain't supposed to be here, look out, you know. So I'd go back and check it just to be sure that nobody was fishing around in there, because that's something you could sell in a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. And to my knowledge, they're either still back there or somebody got them.
I'll give you the postscript on that a little bit later, but yeah. So you were so intimately involved, Don, not only in the cleaning up, because that was so essential. I remember our first event. We bought the place, by the way, in April of 2001.
Yeah.
And the Masons overwhelmingly supported it once we got through a few gymnastics. And then we had our first event, May 1st, 2001, with Gene Gerhardt, the biographer. We had Lorraine Melise from Bush Industries.
Yeah.
Converted the basement into a magic wonderland when, you know, ceilings were still falling down. I mean, we had a long ways to go. But you were so involved in making sure that we kept on task.
Well, you're largely was the driving force, and all I had to do is follow your lead. Really. Sometimes I had to run hard and fast to keep up to you, but I did. And I remember that Melise woman. She was a real pretty girl.
Very.
And she said, "You're never going to have this ready, are you?" And I said, "Watch my lips." And she got a big kick out of that. And so I go through there, and every time I seen something that needed to be done, I put it in my cooker, and I had somebody on it the next day.
Yeah.
Whether you're wiping the poles down, painting the poles, whatever you're doing, make the floors as clean as possible. Remember, they were wood floors and they were ugly. And I said, and then I want you to go down and I want you to buy Simon Ice. What do you mean, car Simon Ice? Go down and buy 5 cans of it. And I said, get some guys out there on their hands and knees, and I want you to rub that Simon Ice into that floor. My maintenance guy used to come up with a buffer at night,
I didn't know that.
and he'd buff that stuff, you know. And I used to tell him, don't make it slippery, just make it look clean and nice. Well, the Simon Ice is a kind of a, that eats into the wood a little bit. So when you go over that first coat, that wood would start to really look nice, you know. Then I'd get him back there and say, put another coat of Simon Ice on there. Or he must have went through 50 cans of Simon Ice.
Oh my God.
But you got to admit, that floor always looked good.
Really nice. Yeah.
So anyway, and people that you were dealing with, they noticed stuff like that, you know. I always wanted to make it clean, really super. And then I always worried, quite frankly, between you and I, of not being fire accessible. And if I had to do it all over again, I would have taken that stairway on the side, I would have brought it out into that a little wider, and I made that stairway curve and go up to the outside, and then I would have built I would have had to build out and probably screw up a parking space. But that would have been always a fire emergency, and people could get out of it. And then the other way was to go right beside the fireplace down there, cut a hole in the wall, and go out that side.
Yeah.
And then the next thing I knew, you guys had I don't know who I think it was Fibitera must have designed that. That would look like a Hibitera thing. When they put that air conditioning unit and hung it out over the building, I went nuts when I seen that, because I would have put that thing on top of that roof, and I would have dropped some columns down through there where they wouldn't have, because I would have cantilevered the strength of the iron. In other words, it didn't have to be underneath that thing. It had to be there, and then you had to run iron back out and get that thing out of anything. You know, don't have it there. And so, but I just said to hell with it. You know, work around it some way or another if I ever get back here. And of course, then I did come back. But the whole night.
What I remember. I mean, so many things, Don, you were intimately involved in. And we got pictures of the inner group, the Carl Kappa, Betty Linnaeus, Dan Braddens, Harold Adams,
Yeah.
Don Bloomquist. I mean, you were right there. Day one. One of the first, if not biggest, issues was the theater. It was bowed and no air conditioning. It was just, and leaked. And you put in lots of steel to work all that. I mean, that saved the day.
50 grand.
Yeah, is that what it was?
Hank, what the heck is his name? He was the engineer for Erie Steel. And I took Hank down there one day and run him upstairs, run him up in that attic. And I said, Hank was a real bright engineer. A little lazy, but bright. And I said, I got to pick this ceiling up. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I got something else I got to tell you about that. And I said, I got to have enough structural steel in here to pick that ceiling up, and make it safe for another 100 years. He looks at me, he says, Jesus Christ. You know. I said, now look, and I got to have it done reasonable. You can put your erection crew in here, because I wouldn't want anybody to touch it but your crew, because they know. And they know me. Because remember, I was the area steward for the ironworkers. I had a handle on everything, you know. So he said, well, I got to go back to the drawing board. I said, yeah. So he comes back and he called me up. He says, 75 grand. I said, oh, Jesus, there's no way in hell I can do that. And I didn't know if you had 75 grand or 75 cents. But I was always...
Yeah.
So he said, well, let me talk to... I can't remember his name. He was the big wheel down there. But I didn't wait for him to call me. I went down to see him. So when I walked in his office, he had the ring on. Mm. And I said, look, brother. He used the tone that he used, brother. And he said, told him about you. Told him about Robert Jackson, which he was aware of. And I said, they want to build, I would say, like a memorial to Robert Jackson for all he's done and what he's created in his life. And I said, and I couldn't find it. There isn't another building in any place around here that would fit better than that. I said, we have attorneys' rooms in there. Remember I put them attorney rooms in? Mm-hmm. Had to wire them all in. Had to cut holes in the brickwork. Yeah. Oh my God. Anyway. And I said, it's all set up. I said, it's been quiet. Nobody tells you what's in there. But any attorney that has an office now in Jamestown that needs to go up there to take whatever he does, and it's in there. And he can do it. And not just one. I think there's about 4 stations up there. Mm-hmm. He said, wow, Jesus, that's all right. He said, I was talking to Hank about what you need for that ceiling down there. He said, I'll tell you what, I'll let you have that for 50 grand. Hmm. So I did my little fundraising deal.
Well, I'd say so. No. I had numbers that were much greater. But that made a difference. I mean, once you had that in, and then subsequently, ultimately, air conditioning in that, it now made it a 12-month.
Absolutely. I knew where you were headed, believe me.
Because when I think about the early days, and I am thinking about the earlier days, we had events in June, July. We'd have to schedule them at 9 a.m. And then and start early, because there was this huge fan, made a tremendous amount of racket, but it was working. And we'd have to turn it on, turn it off, because we didn't want the noise, but it was so damn hot, because it was just a big cooker. Yeah. But
that just made good sense to bring it into the century that we're in, you know. Yeah. I mean, that was old stuff. Old. There's a thing up there I never got to. You know that chandelier up there?
Yeah.
Do you know that's rigged to come down to the first floor?
No.
Yeah. But I never wanted to jump into it. It's there. I cleaned it the first time.
Yeah.
But it's probably filthy again, because they grab everything, you know. And put this on one of your wish lists. Come up and you got to have an electrical contractor do it.
Yeah.
And because it's on a, and they gotta. I always got to tell a guy how to do his job before he does it. You know, it's got to be stationary, and then they cut it loose, and then they add all the things. But you don't want anybody climbing up there.
No.
But they don't have to really climb up there if we do it right. We'll put an electric motor on it. And there'll be a switch on the wall someplace. And when it comes time to clean that thing, if it's once every year, zzz, it comes down, they clean it, zip, it goes back up. and it's all wired, it's all lit, you know. And because I hung that thing myself, that thing out there was heavy enough, you know.
Yeah, I can't imagine. The other thing, one of many things, but Don, one of the things I remember you magically saving the day when scheduled for May 17th, 2003 was the appearance of Chief Justice William Rehnquist. Unheard of that the Chief Justice would come. And we spent months. I went back and saw the diary, literally started about a year ahead of time thinking about this, and never anticipating that a few days ahead of time the weather report would be such that despite our best thoughts of having wonderful chairs, beautiful bright blue sky day in front of it, the forecast was rain and entered Don Bloomquist.
I got to tell you what, them chairs, you had to admit, we had just seeded that lawn, right? It was soft. If you walked out there with shoes, you'd be over your shoes. So I said, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I go down to, what's the outfit from Bemis Point?
Chautauqua Brick?
Yeah, Chautauqua Brick. I said, I need 20 sheets of plywood, and I'll bring them back to you. What do you mean bring them back to me? I said, told the guy what I had to have. He said, geez, I don't know if we can do that or not. And I said, let me put it to you this way. There won't be any mud on them. So as you, I don't know if you recall this, I put black tar paper all over the lawn. I put the plywood down, put the chairs on them, and I made them guys walk on the chairs so that they would be embedded so that if somebody set them on, they were over me. And the front steps weren't right. And and now that this goes ahead of that, I had to go up there and I climbed underneath that porch and I looked up, and I hate to say this, but one of our local construction guys, they went in there and all they did, you remember that ceiling was also sinking, you know, and I wanted to cut the columns off, but I didn't want to cut them off on the top. Very little, but they were spongy. So I got in there and I said, I made these guys go in there and I said, every place a column comes down, I want you to dig a footer, and it's about this big. I want a footer, be concrete. And I said, every column on the corners, I want it to, they turn the corner, I want the footer to turn the corner. So you get down there, we poured that, got the concrete in there, you had to shoot them all with an instrument then to be sure that when you jacked it, everything was going to be the same. So we get in there and get them up there, and then I had to jack the porch separate, you know. Go up and cut about that much off at the top, pick the pole up, block it, see how much I had to cut off the bottom of it, make sure that everything is agreeing with the other measurements. Set them back down, put them on new clean wood. And this has always been a chore. When you jack that much up, and there's a million ways it can go wrong. You release them jacks and it all went, and I said, run over and see if there's any air between any of the bottoms and the tops. They were all tight. It was the way it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
I said, God just blessed us. Anyway, and they're still there. I walk by there, or I drive by there, and I drive in sometimes, and I get certain areas I look at to make sure that it's all right. And I did want to dig up the driveway one time because there's a drain pipe that I don't know where it goes, and I didn't. There'd been other contractors in there beside me, and I didn't want to dig up something that would create a problem. But I would have liked to put that back in shape. But And there's a lot of ways of doing it. You could go in there now and probably put a mechanical snake down there and play with it for a while, and finally let you find out where it was going, you know. But it's not the most important thing in the world. So I belayed some of that stuff off, you know.
Well, another thing I remember, we put in the handicapped accessibility.
Yep.
In the front of Prendergast, and you guys were digging, and you or somebody on your crew called me because it was down deep into the foundation in the front of the Prendergast Avenue, and there was a door. There's a door way down, which was an entry to the consistory. And you called me. I came down there with cameras, you know, all of this stuff, because I said, man, this is cool. And you said, Greg, go down, take lots of pictures. This is really wonderful. But don't tell anybody, because we're putting in this handicapped accessibility. So I've got a wonderful array of pictures. We went on the inside. In the inside, we could see where it was entering. Really didn't know what it was. It was probably a fruit cellar, but it made for mystery.
Did you ever read the lore behind that?
No, tell me.
Oh my God, it's wonderful. That's why I was always so interested in keeping that. Did you ever block that thing up in the basement?
Yeah.
Oh.
No, in the back. No, that's open.
I gotta tell you why. According to the lore, that I forget which one it was, one of the owners of that house, she was a fanatic on dress when the ladies really wore and every morning before church, she'd watch the ladies go in that church. And then she would go upstairs and dress. And she came into the church through the bottom. Ah. And I went into the city records and everything, trying to find out in years, but they never kept records of anything. They just knocked everything apart, you know. But there's a sewer cover right in the middle of the street out there. So they had to probably disassemble that. And I don't know that minister of that church, but he never liked to talk to me or anything, you know. So, but I always wanted to get to him and see if there was another entry into that church, because there had to be.
Yeah.
And so I said, just leave it alone, you know. So, but anyway, the lore says that she came in and then she went up to her seat, dressed 100 miles away, you know. She was really looking beautiful. And so that was her thing. And she was, I guess, she gave a lot of money away in Jamestown and everything else. But the whole instance of the thing is that connected to the Jackson Center with that kind of history. Yeah. If I could have made it all come true, right? That project meant a lot to me. It was part of me, and I wanted it to be dress right, dress all the way. And as far as I'm concerned, it was, okay?
Thank you, Don. What you did was incredible.
But if you're just a contractor, you can be so incredible. But if you really want it, you got to go the other direction a lot. You know?
You did so many times. Thank you.